Hello there, and welcome to Sit for a Spell, episodes, 14, right. I apologize for the really long, extended break. I've been fairly busy. I'm starting to write 2 new columns for online magazines. I've got a new column at the Pagan channel of pathos.com. It's called Seekers and Guides, and it's about pagan education and study of the craft from both the teacher and student's perspectives, and that's under the Agora blog. You'll find it there, so if you can't find it right away, that's how you find it. And I'm going to be starting a column at Witches and Pagans magazine's website called 49 Degrees, Canadian Pagan Perspectives, and that'll be all about being a pagan in Canada and the unique experience about that. So I've been doing a lot of writing, is what I've been doing. So I apologize for the break. Today's episode is something that was specifically viewer requested. I've been asked to show an episode on opening gateways. Now, first of all, what are gateways? Gateways are portals that link the other worlds to our world. And there are many different worlds that you can access. First of all, you have to decide whether or not you believe in the physical, actual existence of other worlds, whether you believe they are entirely spiritual, or whether you believe they are entirely psychology. No matter which you decide, the techniques to approach them will be effective regardless of your perspective. The second thing to understand is that what is it are you trying to call? Because there are different types of spirits, entities, or thought forms that represent different energies and ideas. Now, I like the Celtic worldview about this. I find this the most effective, and it's also echoed in a lot of ancient pagan cultures. The Norse also have sort of a triple view, and that's really what I'm getting at. Here's our world. There's the underworld. There's the upper world. Right? And our world is also called Midgard, of course. The underworld is also known as Niflheim or Anun, and the upper world is Asgard, or Isgard, rather, or I can't remember the Celtic name for it off the top of my head, but there's a specific name for it. I don't know. It just translates to the upper world anyway. New Age people would describe the entities from these areas as having different vibrations. The underworld entities tend to have a, quote, lower vibration, and the upper world entities have a, quote, higher one. So many gods will be found in the upper world, the faeries, the entities that some cultures call angels, that's where you'll find them. The underworld contains ghosts, the darker deities, and hostile spirits which have been known as demons. And that's the other thing that you need to understand. If you're going to open gateways, what you're doing is you're putting up a big neon sign in the other planes, and it will attract anything that comes along. Not all the entities out there, those who have been physical or those who never have been, like us. And they can be a real pain. Even fairies, which are generally good-natured, can be a real pain in the butt. They can cause all kinds of havoc. This is why in my tradition we're very specific about dismissing anything that we call. So, to start with, make sure you're working in sacred space. This is my dedicated temple room, so it is sacred space by definition. Work within a cast circle. Always make sure that your wards are active. Don't cut any corners when you're doing this. Don't be afraid either. That's the other thing to understand. Even if you do manage to attract a hostile entity, it can only hurt you if you let it. If you invite it, it can create a problem. But if if you forbid it, if you're very firm, it's just like dealing with lousy house guests who come and, eat all your food, right? You kick them out, you say, get the hell out of my house, right? It's the same thing. So, now that we've done all the preliminaries and safety precautions, different techniques to open doors into other worlds. More than anything else that I've ever shown you on this particular program, this is all about intent. It's all about your mind focus. This is why we're working in this dim space, because it is easier to enter a trance state when you're in dim lighting. Now there's a couple traditional methods. The most traditional method of opening a gateway is this. What I have just done is spin around in a circle, whitter shins 3 times. That's your traditional method to open a gateway, right? I imagine that south of the equator you would want to spin Deosil, but don't quote me on that. And if any Australian or southern witches would like to get a hold of me and inform me that I am mistaken or accurate, let me know, all right? So, but the idea is to go against the everyday. If you read about it in fairy tales, people are walking witter shins around rings of mushrooms all the time in order to gain access to the fairy world, or they're walking witter shins around barrow mounds in order to gain access to the underworld. So that'll work. It's very effective. I've been to a whole bunch of Samhain rituals, probably about 5 or 6 of them, some of which I've written, in which part of the deal is an underworld journey, and we slowly walk in a circle, witter shins, contemplating our descent into the other world. Remember, I said that in this particular case, it's more about your focus and intent than anything. Entering a trance state is what's relevant. If you're not certain about ways to enter a trance, you might want to check out video number 2 in my Witches 8 Paths of Power series, which explains what a trance is and different methods by which you access it. The more senses you bring to bear, the more effective it'll be. So the dim light for visual stimulation, you can put on music that's appropriate. I always find that very effective. The movement, it's called kinesthetic driving, anything that involves movement, and you can use that. You know, bringing different things to bear. I don't want to reiterate everything that I've already said in that other video. If you want more information, check that out. Okay, so other traditional methods. Any reflective surface is traditionally a gateway into the other world. This is why when you were in school and they did that whole Bloody Mary thing, they did it in the dark in front of a mirror, because they were trying to access the other world. This is why people have also managed to freak themselves out really effectively. So I wanted to show you the area behind my house, which is the BX Trail. It's a traditional wildlife corridor that follows the BX Creek, and it's right in the woods. There's a couple of areas down there where the trees grow together, like so, forming a natural archway. Those are traditional entrances into the fairy realm, so you can use them as a focus for your magic. Other things are, if you're in an old house and there's an area that used to be an entrance but is no longer an entrance, that also can be a very effective doorway, to, especially when you're looking to talk to ghosts, for example, spirits who've gone before. If you're looking to talk to your ancestors, it can help to have a focus, like, say, a family picture or an item that belonged to them. And then you can also use reflective surfaces. Another example of this, I've got my handy-dandy cauldron right here, and notice that I have filled it with water. Now, I mentioned this, I believe, in episode 7, which is the episode on scrying, that you can use it as a focus for visions. You can also use it to open a doorway. I used to stare into puddles all the time, as a matter of fact, as a kid, because I could sense the other world that was there, and I wanted to jump in, but, you know, we have to do that in our spirit, not in our physical bodies, naturally. So, how do you make this work? How do you focus this? Well, okay, one method, drumming and chanting, you know, rattles, shamanic focus, right? In which case what you do is you stare into the mirror and you concentrate on what it is that you're trying to call. Be specific. Don't ask for anything that you don't want to show up. You know, and expressly forbid them. A good thing to say is that anything that bears us any ill will is not welcome here. Only those who come in perfect love and perfect trust are welcome in our space. And that will refer to the invisible as well as the visible beings. Right, so you can do that. And I'm not going to actually do that because we could be here for hours. It can take a very long time. You just kind of focus and chant and concentrate your intent. You can symbolically open the door. You can also use what are called the spirit invoking pentagrams. Now you remember I did that whole big thing on the different elemental invoking and banishing pentagrams, where there are also spirit banishing and invoking pentagrams. They work a little differently. They don't, they go in an entirely different direction. The active spirit invoking pentagram goes from the bottom right hand corner to the top one, across to the right hand, to the top right hand corner, down to the bottom left, and then, yeah, did I finish that? Up to the top, back down to the bottom, there we go. Okay, right? Banishing it, you would draw it in the reverse. You start at the top left-hand corner, go down to the bottom right, and then complete the pentagram that way. The passive spirit invoking pentagram goes from the bottom left-hand corner to the upper right, and so forth. And then the passive spirit banishing pentagram goes from upper right to bottom left. Now, what the hell's the difference between the active and the passive, right? Different thoughts on this, guys. Different thoughts on this. It all depends upon your tradition. Some people believe that, okay, now, some people have a slightly different system about the elemental corners in the pentagram. And in their system, the first one draws between the two active elements, fire and air. And then the other one draws between the two passive elements, earth and water. But obviously my pentagram and the system that I learned is a little different than that, if you remember that particular episode. So, that's not how I view it. Some people believe that you call higher vibrational entities by using the active one, and the lower vibrational entities by using the passive one. And some believe that it's all a matter of, are you calling things forth into this world, which would be the active, or are you calling so that you can create a window through which you can talk to the other world, and that would be the passive. So it really is a matter of what is your intent. Personally, I tend to like that latter belief, and that's how I tend to work with it. If I want something to come here, say, this year on Samhain, I went to the Western Gate Samhain Festival, which was a really awesome pagan festival that was thrown here in my local area. It was in Kelowna, and we had a dumb supper where we invited our ancestors to come join us. And they would feast with us, and we would sit silently and feast with them and communicate. And we would just, eat what we had, and we would leave them a portion. And I had a wonderful experience where I communicated with the spirits of both of my grandfathers, who told me they were proud of me. And I had a miscarriage a few years ago, and I communicated with the daughter that I didn't quite have. So it was really very moving for me. Now, they had a gate which they created. This is also an option you can do. You can make a gate. I'll splice a picture in here. I deliberately took it off my phone so that I could do that from the event where they created an archway. It looks for all the world like an ancient Celtic dolmen. I can tell you that it's actually made out of balsa wood and styrofoam, but you can't tell, and it looked great. And that was we put it in the west, which in the Celtic belief is traditionally the area from which you enter the underworld. You go across the ocean with the guidance of Manan and Maclear, and you head to the land of the ever young that way, right? So we set it up in the west and invited our ancestors or our beloved dead to come through the gate as they willed. And it was, I'm not the only one who had a really moving experience. So again, focus, intent. I'll show you the picture. It's beautiful. My husband has reminded me, actually, that the name of the upper world has been things like, well, that's it, right? The land of the ever young, Tir na Nog, or the Summerlands, as we call them in modern witchcraft. So that's what you would be reaching for. So yeah. Anyway. Alright, so that's another method by which you can do it, and it's really all a matter of intent. In that particular case, what we did is we had a chanting ceremony. We all faced the western gate, and we asked our beloved dead to come forward and join us for this time when the veil between the worlds was thin. Which is another thing about opening gateways. Times. Traditionally, good times to open gateways to the underworld has been Samhain, and a good time to open a gateway to the upper world has been Beltane. But the winter and summer solstices and the equinoxes have also been considered to be appropriate times to do that, because either light or dark is at its most powerful, or they're in perfect balance. The first in the case of the solstices, of course, and the second in the case of the equinoxes. So that's one reason why those times are considered to be very sacred, is because they're liminal times. Liminal being between things, neither one nor the other. Another way in which gateways are opened is liminal spaces. The Celts used to go to the beach, and they would put one foot in the water and one foot on the land, and invoke things, because they were neither in one world nor the other. So anything that's like that. Mountaintop, right? You're between heaven and earth. Sitting at the base of a tree. The branches are reaching for heaven. The roots are reaching for the underworld. You're somewhere in between. There's a very, a really effective visualization that lets you use a world tree as a method of reaching either the upper world or the underworld, which is in a book by D.J. Conway called By Oak, Ash, and Thorn, Modern Celtic Shamanism, and it was very useful. I've done a lot of meditations with it. You've seen my dog Blue before. He's decided to join us. So, I think that's what I have to say about that, other than in terms of the nature of what you're calling. Like I said, be specific. If you're trying to reach the fairy realm, state so. If you're trying to reach an ancestor, name that ancestor. And also, put away your toys when you're done. Send everybody home, close the gates, tell them thank you, right? And ground. More than anything else, when you're doing work that crosses the barriers between the worlds, you need to be able to ground yourself. Eat and drink something, especially if you're doing underworld work. The same Samhain rituals that I spoke of. There's always a return to the light, where we start walking Deosil and return back to the world of the living. And then we share in a symbolic food, and it's usually something that is very much associated with the earth, like bread and salt, or perhaps apples, something that is very life or earth grounded, so that you remind yourself that you are among the living and not the dead. It's so that you don't end up walking in that strange liminal space. Likewise, ground yourself when you're reaching for heaven. It's really nice to be able to communicate with the gods, and we can do it, and we can do it directly, and we don't need any intervention. That's the beautiful thing about witchcraft, but you have to come back to earth eventually, because we are mystics in this world. Oh, yes, labyrinths. Labyrinths are another very effective means of doing this. You can enter into meditation, or I don't recommend it unless you've got someone to work with you, but you can also use water. You can either float on it or kind of sit in it, and you can use that because, again, you're not in one world or the other. Yes. When you're dealing with the Fae folk, always leave an offering. They like sweet things. They like alcohol. They like milk. They like honey. Right? Make sure you leave something for them, right? And show them your respect. They were the ancient gods of the land that they are in, and they deserve respect. When it comes to angels, ask. When it comes to demons, I hope you're not going to work with demons, but if you insist, command, be firm, have the strength to deal with it, send them home. Do not give in to your darker urges and send them after your enemies. That invites them to stay. This is not a good idea because they do not like us. See, it's not a moral thing in my case. Witchcraft is just energy, and it really isn't how you use it. But the entities that we know as demons don't like us for whatever reason. So they don't like you. So they will get you if they can. So it's just not a good idea to deal with them. And don't bother angels for bullshit. Right? Call on them when you need something of real importance done that is greater than yourself. Do not call on them for selfish means. They will not help you. Fairies might, but only if there's something in it for them. Now, yes, one more thing. Why did I use a wand? Because a wand is for use, according to Frederick Lamond in 50 Years of Wicca. He said that it says in the Book of Shadows, and he worked with Gerald Gardner in the original New Forest Coven, that a wand is for use when it would not be meet to use the Othame or the sword in dealing with certain spirits. For him, the answer was obvious. It was for dealing with the fairy folk, because they don't like iron. So you don't want to be waving sharp, pointy metal things at them. It's not polite. So use a wand instead. By tradition in ceremonial magic, a wand is used. Those of you who are familiar with ceremonial magic will see that my witchy wand here, which is a piece of oak wood, is also cleverly disguised as a traditional rainbow wand. So, or rather, it is a traditional rainbow wand that has been disguised as a witchy wand. It serves both purposes. That is so that I can deal with elemental spirits more effectively. So, again, when you're going to close the door, make sure you devoke what you called. So I have shown you the invoking. This is, again, the invoking active pentagram. And this is the invoking passive pentagram. The devoking is in the opposite order. Or make sure that you always devoke, thank whatever you have called, leave an offering. Leave an offering even for your ancestors. As you can see, I have a lot of skull things up here. This is not because I like dark stuff. This is because I welcome the spirits of my ancestors to join me. And since they are dead, this helps me to get a personal focus on communicating with them. That's, the whole... There's a whole mystical thing about that, but I think I've talked long enough. So, if you have any other questions, or if you can think of anything that I have missed in terms of opening gateways, please let me know. And otherwise, that's it for Sit for a Spell this week, and I will see you again in 2 weeks. Marry me.